Well, since you've explained your process of interpreting, could you maybe give us some tips for beginners in this field, how they can go about and achieve their dream of becoming an interpreter or a translator?
Sure. There's something that I tell my EWA students all the time. I mean, these are EWA students. They're super talented. They're very hardworking, and they're already good at translation.
Right.
The thing is, though, it's there a lot of being a literary translator, a professional literary translator, and there aren't many of us. Is a lot of it doesn't have really much to do with translation from the outside. You actually have to be a very outgoing person, and a lot of people are very surprised by this fact. Like when I got the call for this spot for morning date, I just immediately said yes without even thinking about it, because like this is what you have to do. I mean, I love being here, of course, but like you have to you can't have stage fright. You sort of have to go out there, network with publishers, network with agents. You have to project an image to even the author that you work with so that they can trust you.
Right.
And I've written like many long letters to all the authors that I've worked with, trying to gain their trust. And you have to go out there, look for all the funding opportunities, like the LTI, the Daesan grant, the pen grant. I've won a pen grant. Like, so there's so many things that has nothing to do with sitting in front of a computer and typing.
Wow.
And you have to sort of be ready to maybe change your personality. If this is the art that you want to practice, then you have to be ready to sort of change your personality a bit and become more extroverted, because a lot of translators are introverted, and a lot of people think someone's just going to give me some work if I sit here and just be really good at what I do. No, that's not how it works. That's really not how it works.
I guess that rings true for a lot of professions, but I'm surprised you say that, because I also thought that translators were quite secluded, or at least introverts. But I guess you have to make an effort to get that literary work, or else you're just going to be stuck at home.
Absolutely, you have to fight for it.
In front of a blank screen, right? Nothing. Very interesting. So that's a good tip for our listeners. But in terms of the language and the linguistic skills, what would you advise people if they're not already majors in interpretation and translation?
People who, I guess that's true. I was about to say people who want to become literary translators tend to read a lot and write a lot already. Although I have found out recently that this isn't necessarily true anymore, which is very strange. Like, why would you become a Dalmatian breeder if you don't like Dalmatian dogs, or if you don't like dogs? Someone else said that. That's not my metaphor. But that's how I feel about literary translation. Like the best thing to do is to read a lot of works, especially in translation. Ones that have a lot of buzz around them, ones that are classics, ones that are, and just reading a lot makes a huge difference. Like a lot of my own students, they sort of translate, and it's clear that they have no clue what the actual market is like. And again, the critics of Deborah Smith, and you read what they're criticizing her about, and you like, oh, it's very clear that these people don't read literature.
Right.
That's not how the market works. That's not how readers in the Anglophone world work, or how they read. English readers read very differently from Korean readers.
Right.
So you have to know what English sounds like in the literary realm. And the only way to do that is to have a huge chunk of time and keep reading, and read as much. Read the best, read the classics, read the contemporary hits, read everything, and have those voices in your head as you translate.
네, 문학 번역 작가가 되고 싶으시면은 일단 본인부터 책을 많이 읽고 이런 쪽으로 관심을 많이 갖고, 또 이제 독자들에 대한 시장에 대한 뭐 이해라든지 그런 것도 좀 잘 파악이 돼야 될 것 같아요. So obviously it must have helped greatly that you were already a huge fan of Shin Kyung-suk before you translated her book.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, because it's I did meet her. I met her after I got the rights, but I did meet her a bit before, and when I was talking to her, and the thing is, authors know when you're a reader of them. Do you know what I mean? Like they know, oh, this
if
one
you're
is
faking it or not.
Right. This one is a fan. This one knows what I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
And all the authors that I've met quite a few authors that I love, and I talk to them about it, and you can see them respond the same way. Like they clearly understand that you understand.
Right.
So, and having the author's trust is extremely important, especially like when you do works where you sort of have to make dramatic changes because sometimes you have to.
Mm-hmm.
There's this one, I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about her, but there's a translator that I know,
Yeah.
and she became friends with the author that she translates, a very famous author,
Mm-hmm.
and the English publisher asked her to cut a lot of stuff out of a certain story, and obviously to an author this is like this is devastating, but because they had such a good relationship, the translator said, "Oh, just trust me, I'll figure out a way to keep it all somehow in the text while excising the parts that they want excised," and things like that, or if another translator who is more famous than you are is trying to steal your work, then you can write to your author and say, "I would really like to work on your next one." Don't think it doesn't happen. It happens all the time. It's happened to me. It's happened to people who are more famous than I am. So there's a lot of politics that goes on behind that. So yeah, that's another factor.
Right. I'm also interested in sort of the editing of the final product. Who gets to do that? Because obviously the original author might not speak the target language as well as they would like to. So who goes through that, or is that just down to you?
It depends on the author. For example, like her English is pretty good. It's really
is
good. So,
it?
yeah, she can read her own works in English.
Okay.
Like Chonsame, who I translated, she can also read her own works in English.
Right.
Chong Young-soo, like all these authors that I work with, I'm beginning to realize that they actually read English. So it's not always helpful to have their input, but more often than not it is. But before we hand in a translation, we have other translators read over the works so that they have so it's not like a purely first draft that we hand in to a publisher, and then the publisher and then the translator go back and forth with edits, and certain questions the translator will not be able to answer, and will go to the author for that. But again, like for Yijin, it was just so thoroughly well written, and I just knew exactly what she was doing in every moment because she was so clear about it. That it was actually a very smooth editing process for that work.
Okay. Let's take a short song break and we'll come back, talk a little bit more about your translations, the process you go through, and also how long it took to translate this 장편소설. This is Because of You by Kelly Clarkson. We're back with Morning Date, and I have right beside me the very talented Professor Anton Hur. He translated The Court Dancer, or I should say he translated Li Jin into The Court Dancer. So, Anton, how long did it take you to translate this book?
It's kind of a funny story because usually a book takes about 2 years after signing to come out. But I got the rights to translate Yijin last summer, and it's August right now, August 2018 right now. Sorry, I'm already in the future.
So it's been a year.
Yeah, so my theory is that the publisher had another book drop out of that slot that Yijin eventually took up. So they said before they told me about that, they asked me how long would it take for you, and I very naively said maybe 6 months. And they said, because the last book I translated took 6 months, and they said, okay, then we can give you this slot. And so I think that's what happened, and that's why the book came out so quickly. In fact, the cover for the book came out before the translation was completed, and that was very hectic. And then I suddenly won 2 very large grants for 2 other full-length books. So all of a sudden I had 3 books that I needed to translate in a year.
Does that stress you out at all?
You think? Yeah. Oh yeah, it stressed me out a lot.
Because you're a professional. Most people, of course, would be stressed out, but you're, I think, different.
No, it totally stressed me out. I think the problem was especially for one book got delayed. My second book is coming out in November, but it was supposed to come out last month, and that was supposed to be my debut translation. But for that book in particular, I translated that after Yijin, and I had 2 months to translate an entire book. But it's not just me who's translating it. I have to also give it to my personal editor, Sophie Bowman, who is also a literary translator. She's British.
Right.
And but it was a short story collection, so every time I would finish a short story, I would send it to her, and she would send it to me back for edits. And it was like a Hollywood movie bank heist because we had to like plan our days like to the hour in order to pull it off, and then the book got delayed.
Oh, okay.
But
Which is a
but
good
that's
thing,
good.
I
Yeah,
guess.
it's a good thing. Yeah, it's more
indeed.
editing.
Wow. So it took you a year roughly to translate Court Dancer.
Mhm.
And what is this next book? Can you say on air
Sure.
what it is that you're
Uh-huh.
translating right now?
It's a collection of short stories by Kang Kyung-hye, who is a we call her a North Korean feminist author who
Okay.
who worked during the 1920s.
Mhm.
So it's coming out by Onford Star in the UK in November. They say it might be December. They're not quite set on the date yet, but they wanted to do a bigger push for it, so
Mhm.
they decided to build up buzz a bit more by delaying it by 6 months or
Mhm.
4 months or something.
Right.
So I thought, okay, that's a good strategy. So yeah, that's the next book. The third book that I'm working on is I won the Daesan grant last year,
Mhm.
which is for Aficionados by Chung Young-soo, which is
Mhm.
also a collection of short stories. He's a young writer who
Mhm.
is also an editor at Munak Dongne. Very excited about.
Right. Do you have a particular type of literature that you like to translate?
Absolutely.
Or what would that be?
It doesn't matter what genre it is, whether it's poetry or because I've done every genre. When you open a book and you read it and you hear it in English, that's when you know that's the one that you want to do.
You just know.
Yes,
Like-
you hear the English. For example,
Really?
right, for Chung Young-soo or Chun Samhae, like when I first read them, it was very clear to me that they had an awareness of what world literature sounds like.
Mm-hmm.
And surely enough, Chung Young-soo was an editor at 열린 책들, Open Books, for their series of foreign classics that are translated to Korean. So he's read a lot of work in translation. Chun Samhae also in an interview told me that when she writes, for example, science fiction, she
Mhm.
remembers all the translated science fiction that she's read in her past, and that's why her sentences are like so easy to translate.
Mm.
So I immediately hear the English. Other authors, for example, there's this one author that I was very keen on translating because he was a queer author, and you know he's has lovely sentences, and
Mhm.
so hits all of the marks. But then when I read his short story collection, it sounded Japanese.
Oh no.
And I was like, I can't. There are some things that are just too much effort that I can't overcome. So you can sort of like borrow Edward Said Sticker's voice maybe for a Japanesey translation, but I thought no, that's way too much work. I'm gonna see if someone else is interested in this book because this book really needs to be translated. So it has to sound like English to me, and
Right.
that's how I choose a book.
뭐 일종의 초능력 같이 저는 느껴지거든요. 책을 딱 보셨을 때 원문으로 바로 영어로 느낌이 오는 책이 있고 그렇지 않은 책이 있고 마치 예전에 Beautiful Mind에서 러셀 크로우가 이제 뭐 그냥 글자 같은 거 보면 숫자 같은 게 이제 눈에 다 보이고 본인만 알아볼 수 있는 게 있는 것처럼
It's very kind of you to compare me to.
네, 허 교수님은 이제 원문의 소설 마음에 드는 게 딱 보였을 때 바로 머릿속에 영어가 착착착착 보인다니 신기합니다. Why don't we take a song break and we'll come back though and talk more with you. This is Albert. song break 아닌가요? 그래요? 아이고. 말이구나. Sorry. We're at the end of our segment. Already? Sorry. I have to say bye. 그러네요. 그러네요. 네, 그거 할게요. 네. 네. Well, I would love to continue talking to you and gaining some insight, but we're out of time. I'm so sorry to say.
It was really fun to be here.
It was wonderful listening to your stories. I really would like to hear some more. Maybe next time?
Sure.
Yeah.
The next book.
Yes. In the meantime, please give out the answer to today's quiz, if you will. A person who changes written content from one language to another is known as
A translator.
a translator. 1번이 정답입니다. 퀴즈 정답 맞히신 분들은 추첨을 통해서 모닝스페셜에서 준비한 특별한 선물 보내드리도록 하겠습니다. Well, have a wonderful day today. Have a wonderful weekend, in fact. And I hope to see you again soon.
You too. Stay cool.